Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the London Borough of Newham's Crime and Antisocial Behaviour Scrutiny Commission. Can everybody present hear me? Just raise your hands just to signify that you can hear me, or nod your head. Fantastic. Thank you very much. This evening's meeting will be held virtually via Zoom. The Council has decided that whilst we are in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic, public meetings will be held virtually for the meantime to keep councillors, officers and members of the public as safe as possible. Members of the public will be able to view this meeting via Newham's YouTube page. For this meeting, we'll be aided by Roger Raymond and Richard Plummer to assist councillors and officers with technology. May I ask members to note that they must raise their hand in order to indicate that they wish to speak, like so. And I also want to remind members that if a vote is taken at any time, it will be by way of raising your hand like so, in order that we can capture this on the screen. This meeting of the London Borough of Newham Crime and Antisocial Behaviour Scrutiny Commission is now called to order. Introductions and welcomes. Can I ask that the officers that are here today from the Crime and Community Safety Directorate just introduce themselves, please? Thank you.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, members, everybody. My name is Gary Connors, Assistant Director of Community Safety. Delighted to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you alone? Is there any other officers from your directorate?
No other officers. Police colleague and Councillor Beckles are here.
No worries. Councillor Beckles.
Councillor James Beckles, Cabinet Member for Crime and Community Safety.
Thank you very much. And we also have a representative from the Metropolitan Police. If you could just introduce yourself, please.
Hello there, I'm Chris Nixon. I'm the Chief Inspector for Neighbourhoods, Partnerships, Schools and Youth Engagement for North East Command, which is Newham and Waltham Forest.
Thank you very much. We also have representatives from the Planning Department and the Housing Department. Councillor Mohammed, if we start with you, and then the officers can introduce themselves. Thank you. Councillor Mohammed, you're on mute.
Yeah, my name's, hi there, thank you, Chair. My name's Councillor Mohammed. I'm Lead Member for Housing Services in Housing Services and Councillor in Kane Town, Northwood. Thank you.
I'm Darren Levy, Director of Housing.
I'm Jane Custance. I'm the Director of Planning and Development.
Good evening, Chair and everyone. My name's Tony Lyons. I'm the Head of Resident Services within Housing.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I can't see anyone else on my screen. So now that that's agenda item number 1 done, we'll move on to agenda item number 2. Apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence, please?
Chair, Councillor Garfield and Councillor Tahora have given their apologies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other apologies for absence from any of the members? That will be noted. Thank you very much. Agenda item number 3, declarations of interest. Are there any members wishing to make any declarations of interest at this time? Councillor Gray.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On view of item, I think it's 5, I ought to declare that I was the lead Cabinet Member for Housing up to, I believe it's 28th of October. However, if there are any items that I had been involved in before I step down, I will have, of course, as a scrutiny member, have an open mind with regard to those items.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gray, for that. Roger, can I ask, has that been noted?
Yes, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any declarations that they would like to make at this time? Okay, moving on. Agenda item number 4, minutes of the previous meeting. The next item is the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of February 2021. I move as a correct record that the minutes of the meeting of the Commission held on the 9th of February 2021. Do I have a seconder for this, please? Councillor Bailey, thank you very much. I've seen your hand. Are the minutes agreed by the members here? Just raise your hand if they are. Thank you very much. Fantastic. Okay, moving on to one of our substantive items tonight. Agenda item number 5, community safety and priorities for the year. I'll be handing over to Councillor Beckles and his officer. I'll give you roughly 5 minutes to do introductions in terms of if you want to speak about any background stuff, and then we'll move into questions. Councillor Beckles.
I'll let Gary lead on this.
Thank you, Councillor Beckles. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. As background of 5 minutes, I've set out a paper that's within the pack of papers for the meeting tonight. And essentially, what I've done is I've just tried to set through some of the priorities for both myself, my role as Assistant Director of Community Safety, my service area, which covers broadly community safety and emergency planning, and also the focus I have as the lead council officer around overseeing and ensuring delivery of our community safety partnership. So essentially, I've set the paper out to basically talk through the Newham Community Safety Partnership, some of our priorities for the year, essentially going into this new financial year as of tomorrow. We'll be looking around violence, domestic abuse and theft, but this Community Safety Partnership does have a number of substantive subgroups that already exist from our 3-year strategy, which we're in the 3rd year of, and we'll be refreshing in 2022. And we've got subgroups under antisocial behaviour, substance misuse and reducing reoffending, domestic and sexual violence, tackling inequality and injustice, and a final group which we are just putting together at the moment, which is around a violence reduction subgroup. So essentially, I've just set out in the paper those areas of work as our wider partnership, and again, happy to take questions in a moment. The rest of the paper just sets out some of those key areas which I plan to focus on now going forward. Again, namely around our emergency planning. We have restructured recently across our whole my whole division, and our emergency planning service has been restructured in quite a healthy position, as opposed to this time last year. We've got fully functioning team, 1 or 2 officers to appoint to finalise that, and also pushing towards ensuring that Newham meets the London resilience standards around emergency planning. And we've got a range of exercises that we plan to put in place across the next year. The other areas, very briefly, that we look to focus on, and but certainly the chair and members here will be aware, there's a whole piece of work across the authority looking at domestic abuse, gender-based violence. So there's a range of piece of work that I'm going to help work with colleagues across adults, children's, brighter futures, other directors to pull together that work. Similarly with hate crime, there's a lot of work we need to pull together around that. We don't have a hate crime strategy, neither do we have a domestic abuse, gender-based violence strategy, so we need to pull those together going forward. And finally, on that section, I guess it's around coordinating better under my role to work to coordinate, linking in closely with the Violence Reduction Unit in Central London, our violence reduction approach. And that's not just looking at peer-on-peer violence and abuse, but also looking at that wider piece around domestic violence, sort of looking across intergenerational violence, knife crime, etc. So it's looking at the whole area. Last sections that I'll be focused on during the paper are our CCTV, and appreciate the opportunity to bring back a future paper looking at expansion of CCTV, working with housing colleagues and others. But I'm going to be looking to review our CCTV provision in the borough, ensuring we link that in with housing, highways, region and other colleagues. There's already some work going on with police colleagues. They're fully linked into this. And the next area is around prevent, ensuring that we ensure that all of our council departments and partners are working closely to meet our statutory duty under prevent, which is working to reduce radicalisation, risk of. And the final piece, which I won't go through in detail, Chair, if that's okay, is basically taking a problem-solving approach, an intelligence-led approach to how we tackle noise, ASB, environmental crime. And specifically, I guess, it's working, as we have been doing over the last few weeks, around some of those community liaison forums where our members and lead members are raising issues, and we're looking to coordinate that partnership to reduce the problems in those areas, and linking back in with the police again, where we're trying to liaise better around what the police are calling community matters. So they will tell us, they will ask the community issues that they have flagged, and we will go back with responses. I shall leave it there, Chair. The paper sets out how we meet a number of those meetings, daily, monthly and quarterly.
Thank you very much. Councillor Beckles, did you want to add anything to that, or are you happy for us to go into questions?
Nothing further, just questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Does any member have a question that they'd like to ask at this time? Councillor Masters and then Councillor Gray.
Given the overlap between substance abuse and reducing offending and then antisocial behaviour, how are you going to sort of bridge the overlaps between your different areas?
Thank you, Councillor Masters. We have the subgroup, obviously, and again, I haven't, because I've briefly passed through the report. Each of the subgroups that I've outlined will have fairly similar, not the same officers, but we'll have officers from each of the statutory partners and through a number of our departments. So again, we would have quite similar joined up work across our ASB colleagues who meet around our community risk management panel and those working around our integrated offender management and substance misuse. So there's a lot of synergy between the people working there. Essentially what I will be looking to do, and again, I haven't gone into it in detail here, but I mentioned in the paper, going forward, I think we will have each 3 years, we need to have a statutory community safety plan strategy for 3 years to comply with law. And we have set out those subgroups in that and so set out those priorities. Essentially what we will look to do, and I will look to do and drive each year, is to set out and focus on those key priorities. Notwithstanding those subgroups will continue to work. So the priorities going forward will be around violence, will be around domestic abuse. There will absolutely be issues around violence and domestic abuse threaded through each of those subgroups. We know that integrated offender management, there's a refresh going on in government at the moment, which will focus on violent offenders. Those same violent offenders we will look at through the DA and sexual violence subgroup. And again, we'll be looking at offenders and violent offenders, sadly, through the ASB subgroup. So apologies, I know it doesn't look at it. I will come back to try and see how it threads together, but there will absolutely be synergies between the people that sit in each of those groups, and I will have an overarching strategy going forward.
Thank you very much. Councillor Masters, do you have a supplementary?
I guess it's just when we would see targets on this and what success will look like. And then the other thing is slightly leaping out in terms of tackling inequality and injustice. Where are you particularly going to be looking? Because there are so many areas that you could be focused on in our borough.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. On the tackling inequalities, and that it would appear, having arrived a number of weeks ago, that is a relatively newer group in terms of setting out its action plan. Essentially what I think we'll be looking at, we've had some very interesting conversations and really helpful conversations and really good challenge from members over the past week around where we're looking to focus support and what we have in the borough to support young black boys in the borough, where we're obviously looking at inequalities, whether it's gender inequalities, race inequalities, looking at unconscious bias. So I think we need to essentially sit down and look at where, essentially outline, do a snapshot analysis piece of work of where some of our inequalities lie, and that will probably be more focus groups than statistics. But I think one of the key parts for me, I'm working obviously closely with colleagues in Children's Adults Brighter Futures around a range of those issues, because other colleagues will have focus on housing inequalities, other colleagues will have focus on education and youth inequalities and family issues. But I suppose where I'm coming from, and again, Chris Nixon, my colleague, I've been speaking to fairly regularly in my last 8 weeks, is around looking at the London Mayor's drive to have a better focus on equalities and community relations with police colleagues. Each BCU is expected to have a stop and search improvement plan that looks firmly at equalities and linking in with the communities. So I think there'll be, for my part, I'll be bringing to the table a lot of that work, I guess, where it looks at the crime focus specific, but clearly, and you know, we all know, clearly it's upstream where we need to make sure we're starting out early in life with these. But again, I will tie in finally, Councillor, on that we've obviously had a motion passed at Council in November to make sure misogyny is included around hate crime. So as I drive forward hate crime, I need to expand that for the borough, even if it's not picked up nationally.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Gray.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, it's two quick points from a ward member's point of view. Is there any plans to reintroduce noise patrol at night? And I appreciate these are resource issues. The second is what, you know, is there an agreed SLA or procedure, and this is obviously working the police, on how to deal with street drinking through things like community protection orders? You know, it's a big problem, and I know there's resource capacity issues. However, it can be tackled or it can be moved on. And while I want it to be tackled, if they just move on, because we have these, you know, years of particular areas blighted by known street drinkers, not rough sleepers, but street drinkers.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. On both points, I'll take the first point first. No, I've come into a position and authority where we have, obviously, as you rightly said, we have reduced for For financial reasons, for source reasons, we've reduced our noise capacity, so we don't have a 24/7 noise service. I've come from an authority south of London where I've had to work similarly, and we've done the same, sadly, over the years. And I know a number of colleagues across London and across the country are in a similar position. What I would expect our officers to do, whilst we don't have a routine noise patrol, the way I have worked in the past, and I'm challenging my colleagues, and they're up for the challenge. Internally, first of all, we do have officers that can work up to 11 o'clock at night, so there's obviously some issues we can negate there. I completely appreciate that doesn't deal with your 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning party. I completely accept that, and obviously there's a lot of work I need to do with Chris Nixon and police colleagues around that. But what I was going to say a moment ago is the way I would expect our colleagues or my officers to work is, if I am told that there is a particular venue or a particular residence that's causing problems every Thursday and Friday night at 10 or 11 o'clock, and again, I have to accept that unfortunately we're going to have to focus on those real key issues, not key issues, sorry, but some of those real key problems where they're regular problems that are genuinely causing harassment, alarm and distress for our residents, that we need to flex our times and tackle those, and then work sort of flexibly. So we might work a later shift one day, and officers will work a bit less during the week, essentially, and I need to work with their shifts. So I would like to think that if you were to tell me we've got a problem on a Friday night somewhere at 2 in the morning, that we will eventually flex to that and we will look to respond to it. If it's sadly a one-off issue, a car alarm, noise issues in the house, domestic noise, we can't respond to that all the time. What I would expect is that there is a response to each of those issues the next day. Happy to come back on that supplementary, but just to cover off the other side of it on street drinking, absolutely, completely agree with your points. I have again, I've come from an area where I've extensive experience on developing PSPOs, following on from the old DPPO when those changed in law in 2014 with the ASB Police and Crime Act. We have had, and it is lapsed, and I've been challenged by Councillor Beckles only today to come back with our renewed plans on this, is we have had, as all boroughs have had, a 3-year public space protection order in the borough that dealt with street drinking, which would give us powers along with our police colleagues. That has lapsed, I'm afraid, as it has done in other areas. My predecessor was looking to review that. I will now take up the mantle on that and get this reviewed. What I think we need to review at the moment is whether it's an all borough or whether it's specific in certain areas. Having said that, until we get that in place, and we need to do a whole public consultation on that again, and I've got some analysts to do the work on this now, but we need to get that, I need to get it started now, and it's on my list of priorities going forward. I should have added on the list here today, apologies. What we can do is, obviously, we can look to do community protection warnings in the meantime.
Gary, can I ask that you keep your answers concise, please? Sorry.
Apologies, Chair. Apologies. I was literally just finishing on that point, Councillor Gray. Yeah. Just saying that, yeah, we will look to work with police colleagues in the meantime, but I will look to reinstate a public space protection order of some capacity. Sorry, Chair.
No, it's absolutely fine. And look, I do appreciate the passion, and you are brimming, overflowing with knowledge, and we appreciate that as a committee. But unfortunately, we do have a number of items to get to. Councillor Gray, you did ask 2 questions in one go, so I'm kind of not really going to give you a supplementary, I'm afraid, but well done. I have a very quick question before I go to Councillor Masters, unless somebody else does have a question. Thank you very much, Gary, and thank you very much, Chris, for coming. My question splits between the two of you. The council have said noise, we're not coming at night time. Where do our residents go? Because when they call the police say call the council. When you call the council, no one's coming. What do our residents do? This is a real problem. This is a real issue. As a local ward councillor, I've seen the figures for Plaistow. They are astronomical throughout lockdown. I'm only going to assume as the economy opens up, as people venture out, as life starts to return to somewhat level of normality, these numbers are going to get more and more. What do my residents do? What is the advice you give them? Gary says wait until the next day. If there's a raging party going on above you, beneath you, next to you, sometimes that's not an option. Chris, your colleagues tell them to call the council. What does my resident do? Any of you? Thank you.
Happy if you want to come in, Chris, first.
Yes, if it's a simple noise matter, then we would be sending people to the council. We can't take responsibility for all noise. If you've got noise plus something else, then we'll consider that. A lot of noise would fall into antisocial behaviour, and we are clearly responsible for antisocial behaviour. A lot of noise, like the raging party you described, would be a breach of COVID regulations as well. But if it is simply your neighbour is playing loud music or their TV's on too loud, we would send that back to the council. I never discourage someone from calling the police. I would rather us and we say sorry.
Chris, I'm going to have to leave you
Noise
there
matter.
just because you're cutting in and out, and I'm sure it's not just me who's getting that. Gary, have you got anything you'd like to say, please?
Yeah, yes, please. Hopefully Chris is finished. Thank you, Chair. I accept what Chris's point as well. I mean, I've challenged Chris as well, and we've had a conversation in my first few weeks here as well about the fact that we need to work out a script when people call our contact centre and how we respond, and essentially what we're telling our residents, and we need to get that right. I think we've got it right on our website. I appreciate it's not what our communities want to hear, that we won't be coming out 24/7. I've said earlier we need to flex to those really wicked issues and those problems that are not reducing essentially. But what I would like to do is, I need to explore whether there are ways we can develop our noise apps, whether we can get people to record things in a certain way that we can take action the next day. And I completely appreciate it doesn't solve the problem like before. I have mentioned earlier we can work up to 11. Our EPT police colleagues within the council will work up to 11 o'clock. We can respond to these issues. If it's outside of that, it is really difficult. We should be able to come back the next day, but I would like to think that we would then resolve the problem going forward. And I'm not going to suggest and say here, Chair and members, that that people eventually it won't become an issue. I don't want people to become apathetic to it and that they don't want to call us because they think there's no point, and I completely appreciate that. But I would like to think that we start to resolve the problems the next day, a bit like we would with antisocial behaviour. But again, happy to come back and be challenged on that in future meetings, Councillor. Chair.
Thank you very much, and I really do appreciate that. And this was raised to your predecessor at the time when he spoke of it. He came out and defended it. We clearly said we thought it was a mistake, and it went ahead. And here we are, months down the road. And obviously, you're in the position that you're in, and I understand that. But from this committee's, position, I would really ask you to look at this matter, because there are, quite a few things that are very, how do I say it, precious to our residents. And there are things that really, you learn this as a councillor, that really get to them. And noise is one of them. It really, really can get to even the most placid of residents. And I just think we need to, as a local authority, have our residents back. And, Chris, to his credit, was very upfront. If it's just a noise issue, we're not coming. And we understand. We've looked at the crime figures in Newham. We understand the challenges that you have to deal with as a police force. And so, Gary, I think our residents need support in this. And I would just ask you to look at this again. But thank you very much for your answers. I really do appreciate them. Councillor Masters.
Thanks, Councillor Lee Parkway. It's picking up from what John was saying, actually, because the lead on from street drinking is park drinking, because with street drinking, you're talking about something that is sporadic. It might be there, it might not. And so, the big problem is, will the street drinkers still be there at the time anyone sort of arrives to address it? Now, my residents in East Ham would not forgive me if I didn't mention the street or the park drinking in Central Park. They're sick of it. It's round the War Memorial. It's very visible. It upsets families that are coming into the park. But there is the problem of where you put these people, because they ended up in Central Park because people didn't want them on the high street. So how are you going to address an issue like that, which once again is probably in the top 3 irritations that East Ham residents complain about regularly on social media?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Masters. I mean, what I suppose I neglected to say in I suppose trying to be brief back to Councillor Gray, and happy to meet any of you outside this meeting, obviously, and we will come and look at each of those issues, and I'll let come and speak to yourself about that particular issue. I think for me, the on-street drinking and park drinking, same thing. It's still a blight in our community. We have less visibility in terms of some of our CCTV in our green spaces. I have met with our parks lead recently from a councillor capacity to talk about some of our more concerning parks, what the issues are, drugs, street drinking, etc. So I've got a fairly good idea. I've asked her to give us our top 10 parks to let me go and have a look at the moment with police colleagues and others. But what I neglected to say earlier, I suppose, to be kind of brief in my answer, is there clearly isn't, and I've never worked from just a draconian point where, sadly, some street drinking, we need to tackle it with punitive measures, and we might need a PSPO to move people on, take away the alcohol, but absolutely it doesn't stop the issue. I need to work hand in hand with support services, to work with our street outreach teams, our drug rehabilitation colleagues, alcohol rehabilitation colleagues. So absolutely it's got to go hand in hand. Notwithstanding, we have certain individuals, maybe even certain communities often, that may not want to rehabilitate or stop their drinking because that's a cultural issue and they'd like to drink somewhere. So it is difficult, but we need to find a solution. I need to look at each issue separately and find a solution, but I will come back to you, Councillor. I appreciate the challenge.
Thank you. Councillor Masters, are you sufficiently happy with that? Would you like to come back again? Okay, fantastic. Does any other member have any questions at this point? Okay, I have one last question then, if no other member has a question. Thank you very much for the report. Really do appreciate it. You pulling it together at quite short notice. I'm quite an outcomes-based person. So for me, I want to know what you are proposing going to achieve. Now, you've given us the process. You've told us how frequently you're going to meet in these meetings, what the meetings are, the subgroups, and all of that stuff in between. But I don't see any delivery dates for outcomes. And that often worries me at times when I don't see what the outcome is going to be and when we can expect to see it. So I would ask you at this point, do you have any of that information? If you do, could you please update the report so that we're clear as to what these actions are going to produce and when you expect it to be produced?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. An absolutely fair challenge. Completely understand that. I think, if I'm very honest, a number of things I've outlined here today are strategies that we're pulling together, and I think I need to work with colleagues to pull those together. So you're probably looking at within about 6 months. What I'm hoping to do is bring back, as in not the work will go on in the meantime, and obviously we look to tackle these issues, but to have a proper outlined plan or strategy or a strategic action plan, which is probably slightly better. I'm hoping to bring, for example, work around domestic abuse, gender-based abuse, and both the violence piece around what we're looking at, county lines, gang violence, etc., knife crime, to our July community safety partnership. So I'd like to have plans agreed there where we can go forward. But what I would expect to have, and I don't have the update here today, but I can bring them back, is we will have timelines, plans, and clear challenge from Councillor Beckles and my boss to have outlines for timescales for some of our key issues. So certainly for our violence reduction action plan, which is in place and I'm refreshing at the moment, we will have key milestones along there, and I can bring those back to future meetings. So apologies, Chair, I don't have the timescales here, but I will embed those.
So can I just pick up on one point? I just want to be very clear on what you just said, that you're hoping to have the timescales in place by essentially 6 months, September. Yeah, that's when you hope to have the timescales in place, or you're hoping for the outcomes to be started to be produced? Because I just want to make sure I'm clear on what I'm hearing.
I hope to have the strategies in place by July. A number of strategies.
So by July we have the strategies in place. So when do you think it is realistic for residents and for members to be expecting to see some outcomes from your strategies, considering that we are now March, April, on the border? Let's give you the benefit of the doubt. We'll say April, right? April. Yeah. When can we expect to see some outcomes? Because if it's July, then we go to August, come back in September, things heat up a bit in October. Before you know it, we're at Christmas. I could be asking you this question next March.
Yeah, understood, Councillor Chair. If honest, I think to look at some specific outcomes and reductions in some of the bigger strategic areas, VOG, hate crime, the violence piece overall, probably longer term, 6 months. On the pieces of work we talked about a moment ago around issues in geographic areas, some of the other thematic areas around drugs, street drinking, shorter scale. I will come back with some key times for you. I'm not avoiding the question, I promise, but I will come back with key times. But to me, that's a work ongoing right now. We should start to see outcomes. Residents should start to see outcomes going forward from right now.
Thank you very much. I really do appreciate your candor, Carrie. I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much. And thank you, Councillor Beckles, as well. I'm going to be moving on to the next agenda item, item number 6, designing out crime. We have this agenda item in 2 pieces. We have the planning department and we also have the housing department. I haven't got a coin to toss, so I will just pick at random. Housing. If the housing department could lay out their case first, and then we'll have the planning department come in as well. You'll have a maximum of roughly 10 minutes to give any presentations that you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. My name's Tony Lyons. I'm the Head of Resident Services within Housing at Newham. And I'd just like to present to you Housing's approach to design out crime. We've developed a strategy which I'd like to explain to you in the form of a presentation, but essentially 4 key areas that the presentation covers. One is how we identify issues within housing that are relevant to designing out crime, the aims that we've got within our strategy, the initiatives that we have put in place already in terms of pilot projects and future initiatives, and also what our next steps will be. The 3 main themes that thread through our strategy really is enhanced partnership working, neighbourhood improvements, and how we are looking and seeking to reduce and finance, particularly new roles that we're looking to bring into housing to support our designing out crime strategy. So if I may, Chair, start a presentation. Hopefully I have the permission to do so on the Zoom.
Are you able to? Yeah, great.
Can everyone see that? Is everyone seeing?
Yeah, we're seeing it.
Seeing this? Excellent, thank you. Okay, so this is our strategy in relation to designing out crime on our estates in housing, and we've broken this down to several ways. We've had a look at the and reviewed our stock breakdown, the breakdown of the housing stock in Newham. We looked at the issues that we've identified in relation to the need to design out crime, our aims, initiatives, and our next steps. So in terms of our housing stock, I will just run through this very quickly. But as I say, we reviewed our housing stock across tenants and leaseholders across the borough. Figures there, just 21,000 more or less tenants and leaseholders in Newham. And we've also completed a review across all of our wards in terms of particularly high-rise blocks, low-rise blocks, those that have concierge housing concierge services in, and also our sheltered housing blocks as well. Whilst I'm whizzing through this, I'm quite happy to share this with any of the members, and in fact anyone who would like to see it, but I'm conscious of the time. But this is the review that we've done completely in relation to our housing stock in developing this strategy. How do we in housing identify issues that are relevant to design out crime? Well, we look at community safety data. We work very closely with Gary, who's Newham Post, and we've had lots of meetings and liaison with his teams and continue to do that, looking at the data, working in partnership with other services in the borough to look at the data around community safety. Site visits, we're doing a lot of site visits. Obviously the pandemic has restricted us somewhat, but we've still had officers out there completing site visits. We've worked very closely with our partners and looking to enhance that even further in this strategy, including the police, of course. And we have examined those tenants and leaseholder satisfaction surveys that were produced as a result of the tenant and leaseholder forums at the back end of 2019, and of course also the citizens assemblies that are held previously, and a new round is due to commence very shortly. So what sort of issues have we looked at in terms of ASB and crime? As you can see here, some of the issues, not an exhaustive list, but some of the key issues that we've identified as being relevant to residents and the reports that are being made. Loitering of groups, cuckooing, which is taking advantage of vulnerable people, potentially to sell drugs from their home or to take advantage of them in other ways. Criminal damage to our housing stock, of course, issues around lighting, safety in terms of passageways and alleyways, drug dealing, drug taking, CCTV, and other security issues. And for instance, we're exploring a program around security in our blocks, upgrading the entry systems, for instance. So these are issues that we've identified as being at the heart of trying to progress this particular strategy. What are our aims? Well, we want people to feel safe in Newham. We want to increase their safety. We want to increase the feeling of them, their feeling of being safe, and their satisfaction in the way that these issues are dealt with. We very much want to be proactive. We want to be involved in early interventions, provide value for money, prevent issues, also empower and include residents, and obviously deter where we can any activity that increases people's fear of safety on the borough. What's the context of this? Well, the Social Housing White Paper sets out very clearly our need to address these issues, to provide safe and decent homes, quality homes and neighbourhoods. There's measures in relation to how we're going to measure satisfaction, what the roles and responsibilities are. There's also the Anti-Social Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act as the legislative tools in which we look at, with the police, but also tools for our officers in the council to deal with antisocial behaviour. Obviously, this all links in with the corporate plan in relation to making a safe environment for people, well-managed safe housing, building communities, and of course very much focusing on youth safety as well, which has been mentioned by others. And again, tenant and leaseholder satisfaction in terms of the yearly tenant and leaseholder satisfaction surveys that are currently being undertaken, and this and feeling of being safe and ASB and crime is a key factor in those surveys. Some of the initiatives we've launched recently and reviewed, our service level agreement with community safety has been thoroughly reviewed. A new and improved enhanced service level agreement has been developed. It has got clear requirements and performance measures within it, and we're regularly meeting Gary and his team within ASB and the community safety teams. We're looking at ASB investigations and case management, and also the enforcement services and the analysis of data that's produced. We're involved, very much embedded in a lot of the corporate meetings around these issues, community risk management meeting, which I attend, and also the tasking group within the council that tasks the council's resources and also utilises the policing team that are funding within Newham as well. We also, I think Gary mentioned an ASB subgroup. We're very much embedded into that process as well, and we provide significant funding into the community safety services as part of the neighbourhood crime reduction budget, as you can see there. Another initiative that we've launched very recently in a trial and pilot project over in Canning Town Custom House is something that we call Estate Busters. Essentially, it's neighbourhood improvement resource, and with the assistance of our colleagues in repairs and maintenance service, we've managed to have a resource to look at how we can better improve neighbourhoods on estates. So we're looking at the data in terms of where our hotspots are across the borough, and we're looking at feedback from residents as well, their reporting, and also internally where we're liaising with other service areas where we can identify the estates that we want to target particularly. And we want to involve residents. There's a new resident involvement strategy, and there's a new part of housing which is all about resident involvement. You know, we have a manager, and there will be 4 key people that will be looking to enhance the involvement of residents in this and other associated strategies within housing and really across the other services as well. So we're looking at how we can improve our blocks and our estates, and it involves all services, and we will be reviewing what we're doing regularly in terms of performance and outcomes, and how we can communicate those with residents and services alike.
You've got 3 more minutes. 3 more minutes.
Okay, so I'll very quickly. We're working cross service within the council to make this happen. We're having regular meetings with teams. We're also looking at very clear resident engagement to include residents. And some of the issues and some of the things we've focused on, increased lighting, for instance. These are very practical issues. We've looked at design out crime works within blocks and estates as well. Again, in Canning Town Custom House, we've piloted this project, which is now going to be spread across the borough on other estates across our borough. A person scheme. This is a resource that we've managed to identify in repairs and maintenance. These are dedicated multi-skilled operatives working in the community with high-vis jackets, liaising with residents, and they're basically completing communal repairs and improvements. And in many cases, it's with designing out crime in mind. As well, we have a new roles that we're introducing. We're having a design out crime coordinator who we are currently looking to recruit, and I would expect that person to be in place within the next 3 months. They will have very expertise and knowledge around this, and will be writing reports for us in reviewing safety on estates, but also will be embedded within other developments and new build new build projects as well across the borough. So a dedicated person who will have the expertise and knowledge to advise us, write reports around designing out crime initiatives for us going forward. A very number of other initiatives we're looking at. Obviously, we're running out of time, but certainly our next steps will involve the monitoring of the service level agreement we have, launching the initiatives that I mentioned in terms of estate busters, looking at increasing resources with dedicated design out crime coordinator, and also we're looking to recruit 3 other members of a neighbourhood sort of task force, really, to as a pilot to put into our hotspot areas to increase safety for residents, and of course increase partnership working as well, and involving residents along the way every turn. I'm sorry that sounded a bit rushed, Chair, and everybody, but there was a lot really to get into. I know we've submitted a report, and this presentation I'll happily share outside of this meeting, as it does contain a lot more detail. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Just to say, look, it wasn't rushed at all, to be honest with you. Also, as members, we've actually got this in our packs already. So we had the ability to look at this afternoon. So that's why it was only really for the benefit of those at home that are watching, really for you to go through it, because we've already had the chance to see it. But thank you very much, Tony. Greatly appreciated. Does anybody else want to speak from that side, from the executive side at all on this? Councillor Mohammed, do you have anything that you want to say on this before I go to members' questions?
I'll be honest with you, I'm really looking forward to, using these initiatives. And at the end of the day, I think, when we've done the pilot in customer regeneration, we got some really good results. I mean, I think we found almost 8 or 9 knives, including a samurai sword. So that is, for me, 1 less knife on the street and 1 life saved. So I think it's very, I'm for being there for our residents, tenant leaseholders, making sure that they're living in a safe environment, and looking at initiatives like designing out crime and making sure that we roll it out through our estates as well. So I know we're doing some pilots, but I think once we get the initial officer in, I want to basically roll it out through all our estates and making sure that we're looking at this, really taking it seriously. I think when Darren first came, was first appointed, we done a walkabout on Drew and Camel, and we found, ASB going on, our door entry systems being broken into. So, this strategy, it's a complete work. We're looking at everything to make sure that everything for our resident tenant leaseholders coming into their buildings, getting out, making sure that they're living, coming into a safe environment. That's all I was going to say.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mohammed. We've heard from housing. Now I'd like to go over to planning. Officer Jane Custance, I'll give you up to 5 minutes just to introduce your piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've produced a paper for the meeting, which gives an overview of the national, regional and local plan policies that refer to designing out crime. And it's those policies that we use to evaluate planning applications against. We do have a process where we consult the police on the larger applications and take their comments into account. And then just at the end of the report, I've referred to the annual monitoring report, which is a report that we produce to evaluate the effectiveness of our planning policies. And that has shown that there's been a reduction in levels of crime and also fear of crime. So that's all I would like to say, Chair.
Exactly what I love. Thank you very much. Straight to the point. Thank you very much, Jane. Greatly appreciated. Does any member have any questions that they'd like to ask at this point? All right, Councillor Masters, I've seen you. Councillor Gray, I've seen you too. Has any member who hasn't asked a question like to ask a question at this point? If not, I'll go to Councillor Masters and Councillor Gray. Councillor Masters.
I absolutely love the idea of estate busters. Anyone who knows me knows I hate strategy. It's something that local authorities churn out. What I want to see are concrete differences to residents' lives. And I think this will all be about relationship building and communication and genuine resident concerns being addressed. So for me, It's about how you see the results of this. And I would love, as a local councillor, to see data coming back to me that say, you know, the infamous block at the end of my road, which is a sort of various issues. This is what we've done. You know, these are the concerns raised by residents. This is what we've done. And it's also sort of about people knowing who the person responsible for their block is, knowing how to contact them and having that relationship. There was an officer we had in charge of fly tipping back in the day when we had the resources to properly have a decent sort of ward-based response. And what I loved about him was I heard from my residents that he was out and about, and they all knew his name. And that's kind of what I'd want to see here. You know, residents knowing who the person responsible for their estate is, having that relationship, and to be able to see, and for them to be able to see that where they've raised a concern, it's been addressed. And even if it hasn't been addressed, the fact it has been picked up, it's on the radar. And if it hasn't been addressed, there's a reason why not, and when it will be addressed. And if all that can be done, I'll be happy.
Thank you very much, Councillor Masters. I'm not sure there was necessarily a question in there. I think it was a good statement, and I appreciate your contribution. Councillor Masters, were you expecting an answer to that? Or?
Yes, I mean, basically what I'm saying is, what is the output of this going to be? Am I, as a councillor in East Ham South, or one of the residents on one of my blocks or on one of my estates, going to see a response saying, these are the issues you raised, and this is what we've done, and this is how they've been dealt with, and if they haven't been dealt with, this is when we're dealing with them, or this is why we couldn't deal with them. Okay,
Councillor Mohammed, I can see you're ready to go.
Yeah, no, honestly, I've been biting at the bits to get Estate Busters going. It's, you know, a really, really good initiative. And I think if we learned anything, it was from the tenant leaseholder forums where ASB actually came up third amongst the feedback that we got from the tenant leaseholders. I'm really, really positive about this because it's a real program of engagement, listening to our residents, looking at their concerns. And especially, you know, for me, the biggest bugbear and the most emails I always get is our door entry systems, ASB going in the block, young people smoking drugs, and it drives me. You know, at the end of the day, I'm really passionate. I want to get this initiative going. Design Out Crime. Let's get it going. And I think the results that we've had from Customers Regen have been really, really positive, and we're actually putting the finishing touches to it. But it's like I said to you, I think it's that engagement. We've never done no engagement with our tenant leaseholders for over 9 years, and sometimes, you know, emails go flying, and I think we just need to. We're playing catch up here with a lot of other boroughs, but I think it's better that we're playing catch up because we're looking at the initiatives, we're looking at other boroughs, what they're doing, and we can only go and improve. So I'm really, honestly, I can't wait. And, you know, hopefully, when the Estate Busters does happen, I want to come back here and give you a report back on the positives of it, because, you know, we're looking at 3 pilots, one in Manor Park, one in Forest Gate, and one in Stratford. So the 3 pilots, it's going to be, you know, for me, it's going to be a game changer on how we engage with our tenant leaseholders.
Thank you very much. Councillor Masters, did you want to come back on that, or are you sufficiently happy?
I definitely want to come back on this. When are you coming to East Ham? I've just put it in the chat as well. I want to know when this is coming to East Ham and when my residents are going to have this contact, their own personal estate buster. Because I know if they're watching this meeting, I hope they are, then they'll want to know when they're getting their estate buster, because they'll like this one.
Thank you, Councillor Masters. And Councillor Mohammed, before you answer, when are you coming to Plaistow as well? Add that to your list. Thank you.
We're going to, honestly, we're rolling it out. So like I said to you, I think one of our offices is doing the initial rollout and where we're going to do it. But we are, honestly, I'm looking forward to it, and we are going to, it's going to, you know, we are going to go to Plaistow. We're going to go to, so I could see, I can give you a time, probably early September, that we'll start rolling out in other parts of Newham. But again, it's about tenant engagement. I think we really need to get residents, tenant leaseholders on board to buy into it. And the more they buy into it, the better results we're going to get.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mohammed. Councillor Gray, I'm going to come to you in a second. I've just got a very quick question for Jane, and it's in regards to the report that you have brought before us. If you've got it before you, 3.7, I just wanted to ask you a question on that. It says the secured by design guides are listed as a key standard which developments are required to meet. My question to you is that only for developments that meet the criteria to go to strategic development, or is that include local development as well? What's the criteria for that?
Well, it would apply to all developments, but it's probably more applicable to the schemes that are sort of 10 units and above. So it definitely would include schemes that also go to local development committee.
Okay, and on its own, would somebody not meeting those requirements by the secured by design standards be enough for their application to be denied based on that alone?
Sorry, just unmuted myself. Well, I think we could definitely refuse an application if we thought that it was going to generate the types of issues that we've talked about this evening. But we do normally try and deal with this by negotiation. So it would be trying to achieve things like natural surveillance and the position of doors and rear fences and so on. And as I say, we do consult the police on that. But it's up to the developer whether they want to go for a secured by design, massification once the development's built.
Thank you very much for your answer. Councillor Gray.
Yes, thank you, Chair. If you will indulge me in two questions again, very brief. First one is actually for Jane, and it's about planning enforcement. Are we enforcing planning, in particular with brothels and associated ASB? And then the second question is to thank Tony and Shabs for their report, a very comprehensive report. I note that 3 months from now, it is expected there will be a design out crime officer. So I'm looking forward on the 31st of June to hopefully meet this person, and I will hold people to that date, 31st of June. But just a serious question is regarding, unless I missed, there's no mention of working with other social landlords, such as housing associations. They are the second only to the borough in terms of landlords, and the people who cause problems on council estates are often the same people causing problems on housing associations estates next door.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gray. Who's going to pick that up, please?
So I can answer that,
Thank you,
Councillor.
Darren.
So the first priority was to get our house in order and to get a plan of attack for our estates, and the Estate Busters programme is the first of many initiatives, and as well as the designing out crime officer, just to pull together, we have got a small task force that we're bringing in that will be responding to where we have particular issues around the borough. And again, there's a sort of 3-month lead-in time for recruiting to that team of 3. In terms of housing associations, we've started having conversations with a number of the larger housing associations around ongoing issues, and Councillor Mohammed and I have been regularly meeting with one in particular with some disgruntled residents. And the next stage really is to pull together a senior level forum with those housing associations to look at sort of key management issues and how we can work together to resolve them. I think part of Tony's presentation spoke about the importance of partnerships, because none of us can do this on our own, and the people coming onto our estates causing issues are the same people that Gary's team are dealing with a lot of the time, the same people that other associations are dealing with. So that partnership working is absolutely key and vital, and that's part of the next stage of our strategy, John. So we can report back at that in due course.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gray, are you happy with that?
Yeah, happy with that.
Okay, thank you very much. Quick question to Councillor Mohammed.
Planning enforcement?
Yeah, yes.
I can
Sorry,
pick,
Jane, go for it.
Also,
Sorry.
it's okay. I can pick.
HMOs as well.
Yeah. I can pick that up. One of the sort of unanticipated consequences of the COVID pandemic has been an increase in the number of brothels. So we have been working in partnership with the police to get them closed down. I don't have the figures at my fingertips, but it has been quite a successful operation. But one of the things that the planning enforcement team has found sort of difficult is that as soon as you kind of Dan Myers, who's the planning enforcement lead, calls it whack-a-mole, that as soon as you shut one down, like more kind of emerge. But it is a live issue that we are proactively dealing with.
Thank you very much, Jane. Councillor Gray, are you happy with that?
Yeah, well, just a quick supplementary. I forgot to mention probably a more widespread problem is with illegal HMOs who don't have planning permission but are associated with antisocial behaviour. And licensing have to give them licenses, but we need planning enforcement to close them down.
Well, again, I mean, we do work in conjunction with colleagues more across the council on this issue to proactively seek to close down unauthorised HMOs if they don't meet our policies. But and so I don't have the sort of statistical information with me tonight, but I'm quite happy to provide that.
Thank you very much. A quick question for Gary. Gary, how much is your budget annually for your department, please?
My total budget is just under 4 million. Let me just, I'll come back to you on it, Councillor, just to be sure, but it's just around the 4 million.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Quick question to the housing team. In terms of the estate busting project, how much money have you actually allocated towards this project?
I couldn't have a figure for you in total because we're looking at each estate, looking at what the requirements are, and it will also involve capital investment as well. So we've got an allocation, I think, of around 2 million a year for environmental improvements on the estate. So we'll be using that to target individual estates. But what we could do is come back with an estate by estate as we get the criteria for those estates. So we haven't set an amount at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Dan. Just to be clear, it's 2 million per year in capital or revenue?
That's from the capital. There's an environmental improvements budget, which we'll be using, but we'll also be, we've got the small team that we're setting up, which will be a dedicated resource, which is 4 officers. And then we'll also be involving the new tenant engagement team, which is another 5 officers. So there's around 9 officers that we've created across the tenant engagement team and this task force. That will be built into the budgets for next year, but we can come back on as we pull together the requirements for each estate, which we'll be doing with the residents. We can come back and schedule that out for you. That would be no problem.
Thank you very much. I really do appreciate that. I am kind of a
Parkway. I was just going to add.
Sorry, just 1 second, Councillor Hand. I'll let you come in a second. I do appreciate your answer, Darren. Thank you very much. I'm just a little bit worried, if I'm honest with you, in terms of open-ended projects, in terms of no set amount. And the reason why I say that is because you don't know yet how much it's going to cost you to do, say, Manor Park, Forest Gate, etc. There could be additional costs. And how can I be confident that you will not run out of money before you get to Plaistow, for example, or East Ham South? That's something that kind of worries me at this moment. And, you know, in the times we're living in, the budget that we just passed as councillors and as members, we are acutely aware that financial constraints are something that we all have to deal with. Maybe it seems, unless you're in the housing department.
No, well, I mean, perhaps you're right. I mean, as we come to the first, I mean, when we've looked at the schemes at Custom House and Canning, a lot of the requirements have been small level communal repairs. They've been, you know, clearing up green areas that haven't been attended before. It's been ramping up the cleaning services. So a lot of the really heavy hitting stuff hasn't been that costly. It's been just been ramping up the services in those areas and targeting what we look at. And in terms of capital investment, again, it's not been huge. Because we've been very targeted in our approach, but we can certainly, as we do the first 3, we can certainly report back. And that's also why we haven't gone out and launched it citywide or borough-wide, because, you know, we want to do it estate by estate so we can do it in a planned and methodical way. I take your point.
Thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. Councillor Mohammed, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I was going to just come in. I think the biggest, most important for me thing is the resident engagement panels, which we'll be setting up. So these panels will be looking at the repairs and maintenance service with ASB. So, like I said, our residents, tenant leaseholders, are going to have more of a say on these panels of how we deliver our service. So, at the end of the day, it's about improving the service, getting ASB right. So I think these panels are going to be very, very important. I mean, at the end of the day, we're here over in Scrutiny. It's the same, it'd be something similar, but with our tenant leaseholders, they're talking to us, giving us difficult questions, looking at things that we need to do. And, it's about estate improvements.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mohammed. I do appreciate what you said about the residents being involved. Of course, we need to engage with our communities. My question would be, in terms of decision making, because obviously if I live on, let's say, the Apple estate, let's call it, for example, then I'm going to want a lot of money spent on the Apple estate because that's my environment, that's where I live. And I'm not necessarily going to be thinking about the banana estate or the other estate down the road, for example. How do you make sure, once again, is there a specific pot amount that is said to these residents, this is how much we are going to spend on your estate at the start of this process? Because if not, I'm just worried residents might expect more than what we can actually achieve through this. How do you manage expectations, Councillor Mohammed?
I think that at the end of the day, when we've done the tenant leaseholder forums, I think it was about managing expectations. I think we did have, that time over £1 million, which we were looking at small improvements, and that money was ring fenced. So I think we have got some ring fence money flying around that we can actually focus on. But I'll get your point. But I think we're going to have to do it by an estate by estate evaluation, see what needs doing. And at the end of the day, I think like one of the key things is door entries. Where we want to pilot some new door entry systems. So where it's going to, for us, it's going to be looking at estates, and trying to get things right. I think it's going to be a tough journey, but, at the end of the day, I think it's a journey that we've got to take. And if we don't take it now, we're never going to take it. So I think, it's about delivering more than anything. And I just, I know what you're saying about expectations, but I think we're all going to have expectations when you do estate busters, and it's about getting that expectation right. And it's, for me, as lead member for housing, like I said to you, I think for me, it's our tenant leaseholders and how we engage, how we focus, and making sure that they're safe on their estates. And that's that's probably the first thing for me. Is safety is paramount.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mohammed. I appreciate that. Does any member have any question that they would like to ask? Councillor Belgica, I see you waving your hand. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I want to ask you two questions, please, that are simple. How long will the pilot project take? And also this pilot project equal in each area of the borough, since there is a lot of diversity?
Do you want me to answer that, Darren, or do you want to?
Yeah, whoever, any of you. Thank you.
I think we're going to be looking at initially probably 6 to 8 weeks per estate, and I think that's a fair evaluation. I think we're putting the final touches of estate busters together. Had we had this meeting probably next week or a week after, I think we would have had something to give you. But I think we're looking at 6 to 8 weeks per each pilot. If we can do it quicker, then it will be done quicker. But I think initially we want to do 6 to 8 weeks, do the engagement. We've already started on some estates, especially with ground maintenance. So some of the pilot schemes have already started on some of the estates. So it's initially, but we ain't done the engagement with.
Yeah, and the idea is, short, sharp, intense pieces of action to address, to hit a number of issues, to get across services, all coming into the same place, hit the issues in a short amount of time, plan a program of management thereafter and any subsequent investment. So we could certainly report back in at the end of the first quarter of the next financial year on successes and lessons learned, and then set out the program following that. I think, Tony, that would be doable?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I'll say Custom House Canning Town project as a pilot has really helped us develop this model. And going back to a point that Councillor Masters made about making residents part of it, very much we've been doing that right from the outset and right through the programme. We've been working on Custom House Canning Town wards, so it's 3 wards, since about October time, in terms of playing a lot of catch up around some of the issues that were already in place. But the last 3 weeks, I've chaired some Zoom meetings with residents in all of those wards for the last three weeks, and we're still picking up points, still picking up issues that residents want us to address. But very much the feedback was very positive. So we feel really positive about this going forward. We know it will be a good positive programme, and we know, and it's demonstrated this evening, that everybody will want it. but resources and allowing, we want to try and bring this programme and this project right across the borough, because it has real benefits, not least from the positive comments that we've received from residents. Actually, Councillor Masters or any of the members want to see a presentation that we run through with residents about some really direct examples of what we've been doing on these estates and what the impact has been. I'll be happy to share that with you and email that to you. Anyone else wants to see that.
Thank you very much,
thank you.
Tony. Councillor Guana, are you happy with the answers that were given, or do you have a supplementary you would like to ask?
No, yes, I'm happy, but only the second one is if it is they're equal, because we have a lot of diversity. Then I want to know if the pilot project is similar everywhere, because we have different areas with different diversity. This is my...
So we need to ensure that resident engagement reaches everyone. And the resident engagement strategy that we've pulled together pulls together a number of different ways in which we're contacting different community groups. So as we tackle each estate, we'd be wanting to tailor that engagement strategy to the estate and to the community groups, and make sure we're reaching out in every possible way we can, so we get as much feedback. One of the beauties of the Custom House Canning Town project is we've had lots and lots of ongoing engagement with local residents groups, and they continually feedback, and sometimes it's positive and sometimes they tell us what we haven't done well, and it's a case of listening to that and responding to it and putting it right. So that engagement with everybody is absolutely vital to this process. So I think it's a key point, and we'll be tailoring it to each estate.
Thank you very much. Does any other member have any questions at this point? Okay, I have a question. Going to the report, Councillor Mohammed, that Donna Morelli has brought. If you go to section 3.6, which talks about partnership working.
Yep.
Fantastic. There's a section here that talks about the Housing Revenue Account grant currently supports the Community Safety and Enforcement Service financially with an annual budget allocation of £643,000 per annum from the HRA. My question is, quite frankly, and I'm a layman when it comes to housing, not one of my specialties, but from what I understand, the Housing Revenue Account is the monies that are paid to the local authority through rent, service charges and leases, etc., from those people who live in properties that the borough owns. Is that correct, people, generally?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So that money is being used to support this service. In terms of the support that it gives to this service, the services that are being offered, are they for our housing estates? So the people who are paying for it, are they the ones who are benefiting from this service? Or is this for the whole borough, for everybody?
No,
not just the housing estates?
This is a specific payment for services to the housing estates. And within Tony's presentation, he was talking about the service level agreement that we've just reviewed with the community safety. So as part of that, I'll pass over to Tony or Gary to talk about that in a minute. But that's why we've set out a dashboard of measures so that we can be assured that we're getting those additional services for the additional money. And that's why one of the first stops was to review that whole service level agreement, the way it was operating, to making sure we were getting value.
Thank you. And I really appreciate that, because that's essentially where I was going in terms of value for money. Because off the figures that Gary gave, you said it was 4 million. I know you put in the chat that it was 5.4. I appreciate the update, but essentially that's roughly 12.5% of your budget. And I would just like to work out from the housing perspective whether or not they feel that we're getting value for money for those residents who are actually footing the bill for this service. So we're spending roughly £650,000 to keep our estate safe. Now, that sounds like a lot of money to me. I'm not sure if that could pay for a security guard on every corner of the estate. I almost feel like maybe it could go some way to having a security team for the estate. Housing, is it value for money? And if it is, can you explain why?
I mean, Tony and Gary, I mean, as I said, the first point of call was to review that whole service level agreement, put in place measures and targets so that we can ensure we do get value for money from it. Tony, Gary, I'll pass over to you for the detail of that.
I'll just jump in. Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Darren. Just from my benefit, and obviously we are working closely with Darren and Tony to establish exactly that. And that was one of my first meetings when I arrived, was to meet with housing colleagues and Councillor Mohammed, Councillor Beckles on this. I know that we're in a slightly unique position where Tony Lyons has worked in both services, so I'm sure he's got a very unique view on this. I can certainly say from my side, and we can look through the figures, and we will do with housing colleagues, that the ASB and a number of other areas, because obviously my budget covers a whole range of things, but specifically around our ASB work, our work in housing is probably 70+% of the ASB work my officers deal with. So I would certainly say from a budget from my side, it's lower than what I suppose what the budget is for the rest of the years of working. Bear in mind, my ASB officers would deal with street crime, street drinking, ASB in parks, etc.
Thank you very much for that, Gary. I really appreciate your introduction there to this. But what I would say is, in regards to my question, I was quite specific to ask housing if they felt it was value for money. No disrespect to you, but they're the customer here, and obviously you're providing a service. Now, I run a small business. I will always try and sell my business, and as you just did there. But the question is, does your customer, i.e. the housing department, feel as though it's value for money? Darren said that they're reviewing it. He didn't actually say he felt it was value for money. Anyone from the housing department want to actually answer whether or not at this moment they feel that the £650,000 that the HRA is paying per annum for this service is value for money for those residents who are paying it? And I understand, Darren, you're reviewing it. Thank you. But does anyone want to answer that question in real time? Thank you very much.
I'll be honest with you. I think at the moment, again, we're definitely reviewing it, and at the moment, once I get the feedback from those reviews, and at the end of the day, I think it's about our tenant engagement. You know, where we need to, I think where we ain't done this tenant engagement work, and we're starting to play catch up, we'll start getting feedback from our tenant leaseholders whether we are getting value for money. And if I feel, as lead member for housing, we ain't getting value for money, then obviously we will review it and make the changes that are necessary. But you know, at the end of the day, we can't. Councillor Parkway, at the end of the day, you know, at the moment we are going for a review of all our services that the HRA pay for, and we just want to make sure that we are getting value for money. And I can't at the end of the day give you a concrete answer and say, look, we're not getting value for money until we actually talk to the users, and the users are people that live on our housing estates. And you know, once we get our tenant engagement strategy going, we start engaging with our tenants. Once we get that feedback, if I feel that we're not getting value for money, then obviously we will make the changes necessary.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mohammed. I really do appreciate that. Darren, was that you who wanted to speak?
Yeah, I was just going to make one comment in that. So, sorry, Councillor Masters. I was just going to say part of that review is establishing a clear set of KPIs and a dashboard of measures for that very reason, so that we've got data and analysis coming out of the service level agreement that can demonstrate the value for money.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Does that kind of clear it up?
It kind of does, but to be honest with you, I kind of cut you off there because I feel that you're actually making the situation a little bit worse, because what you've just said to us is that we're spending £650,000 of taxpayers' money and we have no idea whether it's a good idea or not, whether or not it's achieving great outcomes or not. And to understand that, we are now putting a plan in place after we've spent the money, by the way, to work out whether or not it's a good idea to spend the money. That for me doesn't seem like a good place to be. But obviously, if you want to carry on, absolutely, I'll let you carry on making a contribution. But I just felt from that perspective, I didn't think it was going that well, to be honest with you. But thank you very much.
Well,
Councillor Masters.
I was just going to raise a point about this as well. I'm quite disturbed that it's going to take 6 months for any of this to get to East Ham. So my East Ham residents who effectively are paying for this scheme at the moment, but are not going to see any results for 6 months, what can you offer them in the meantime while they sit and watch residents in Canning Town and Custom House getting this, what sounds like a really exciting service? And we're getting nothing in East Ham. It just seems a really weird way to roll it out.
So let's separate two things. So the £643,000 that's paid from the HRA to community safety is part of the borough-wide service that's delivered. There's a service level agreement in place. There's no reason for us to suggest we're not getting value for money, but as part of a periodic review of service level agreements and to ensure that it's enhanced and refreshed, and we're re-looking at the KPIs and dashboards. In terms of estate busters, that's a brand new initiative that we're introducing within housing that we're funding, that sits separately from that 643, which will be a rolling programme of improvements across different estates. So there are slightly two different conversations.
Thank you very much. Councillor Masters, do you want to come back on
Yeah, just a really quick supplementary.
Sure.
But it is costing money, isn't it, estate busters? So my residents in East Ham are still paying for a scheme that they're not going to actually see come into their area for another 6 months, which seems like a hell of a long time. So what would you say to them when they're asking why they're not getting this and Canning Town and Custom House are?
Okay. Well, let's look at programme rollout. And then we can, when we look at what we tried to do is pick estates that we think were priorities, but we can come back to members and look at a programmed rollout across different estates, create some visibility of when we can hit estates, and that way we can manage some of the expectations.
Thank you very much, Darren. I just want to come back to you on one point. I did say to you that I think it was best we left it, but obviously you did come back to try and clarify regarding the service level agreement and the KPI refresh. So obviously we have a service level agreement in place, which means that they would have to meet minimum service levels. I understand that and I appreciate that. That's why I'm a bit confused as to why you cannot answer whether or not it's value for money yet, because if they are meeting that or they're not meeting that, then that would give you some indication, or at least be able to give members and the public some indication that that money is being well spent at this point. As I said, I was happy to move away from it, but you did kind of veer back into it. So fair enough, let's get into it.
Okay,
Thank
apologies.
you. No, that's fine. I'd just like to hear what you'd like to say about that. So obviously, are they meeting the minimum service levels or not? Thank you.
In far of the review, they're delivering against that service level agreement, and we're going through a process of refreshing that and relooking at the KPIs. Tony, Gary, I don't know if I'm missing the point here.
No, not at all, Darren. I mean, we've worked very hard at reviewing this. So let's actually, the service level agreement previously was based on a different setup. It was based on a completely old, antiquated setup, and that's why it needed to be reviewed and renewed. And we've done that, and with all the sort of performance measures that we've now put in place and the close reviewing of that, it's really going through that process. But I take your point about it. It's something we inherited, and of course, this has coincided with a period of time when the service that Gary now runs has been going through significant restructuring. So we have taken that into account as well as part of our review, and we will, as I say, monitor that as we go along. But it's been quite tricky to put it together, but we want to work with, you know, ASB and the community safety teams, knowing that they've had this restructuring, but making sure that the services can still be delivered, and you know, I've got the confidence in Gary and his team to do that with support from us.
Thank you for that, Tony. I really do appreciate it. And Darren, no, look, I don't think you're missing the point. I think the point was very simple. It was a very simple question. Are we getting value for money or not? We've gone around the houses, we've gone up the hill and down the hill again. And that was my only question. And all it would have taken was just a, yes, councillor, we are getting value for money. And then I would have said, well, how do you know that? Tell me how. But anyway, thank you very much, Darren. I really do appreciate it. Does any member have any question? Speak now or forever hold your peace. No other members? No? Okay, Councillor Hamid. Oh, sorry, Councillor Gray.
Just to clarify that we are going to get some stats from planning enforcement, in particular on HMOs and other planning enforcements related to ASB.
Yeah, I'll bring something back.
Thank you very much, Jane. Appreciate that. Okay, if we've got no other questions, I just want to say a massive thank you to all of the officers who came today, also the lead members, Councillor Beckles and Councillor Mohammed. Feel free to stick around if you want. However, we will not. We will understand if you want to leave at this point. Absolutely. Thank you very much. Moving on. No worries. Moving on to agenda item number 7. Which is looking at our modern slavery review, the report and the recommendations. Does any member have any sort of comments that they would like to make at this time regarding that report? Has everyone read it, first of all, hopefully? Yes, thumbs up, yes. Okay, does anyone have any comments that they would like to make at this time or anything that they would like to speak out specifically on? Councillor Gray?
Yes, Chair, we've had a brief discussion on this beforehand. But I would like to add or propose that a new objective is set, and it's regard to the council staff pension fund. Which, again, perhaps I'll declare I am a member of the pension committee, but it's an area that is and should be of concern with regard to modern slavery. You know, the pension fund's got about £1.3 billion in assets, and it owns shares in company not only in the UK but all over the world. And there are sort of recognised concern with supply chains in the companies we invest, and modern slavery, destroying the environment, employing child labour, health and safety. These are all relevant concerns, but to just use an example, in the last several months, the online UK company.
If I just may interject very quickly, can you just refrain from naming anybody unless it's, you know, a conviction has taken place, etc., or a company? I'm just mindful that we should just be careful on this ground. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. There has been, you know, quite considerable publicity about a certain online fashion company that has faced, you know, serious allegations of modern slavery with regard to its outsourced garment factories and sweatshops in Leicester, where the allegations were, you know, due to the company were not ensuring that its subcontractors were not running sweatshops with workers being treated not only very badly with regard to minimum wage, health and safety laws, but the COVID restrictions were being frankly ignored. So this is an example. Obviously, the pension fund is conscious of this, but it would be fairly damaging to the council if we had a modern slavery policy based on our motion when our own pension fund was investing in companies which were frankly allegedly turning a blind eye to modern slavery. And also the pension fund is itself is a mechanism by which Newham can work again with partners in order to tackle modern slavery in the UK. In Newham, yeah, there could be similar sweatshops in Newham for all we know. So I would suggest that we, in the policy, it is reflected that we need to work strongly with the pension committee and the pension board to ensure that we're all doing our bit to tackle the scourge of modern slavery, both locally and nationally.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gray. Officers, I take it you've noted that. I just need to make sure, does any committee member have any reservations to us including that as a recommendation in the report? If you do, just raise your hand and I'll come to you. If not, we'll agree that we will include that in our report. Does any member have any reservations? No? Okay, well then we'll agree that we'll include that in our report. Thank you very much, Councillor Gray, really appreciate that. Does any other member have anything that they would like to say? Councillor Masters?
I just wanted to elaborate on the point around extra training for frontline workers. I'm not sure how aware members are, and for the benefit of anyone sort of viewing on YouTube as well. The council's been doing some great work with the voluntary sector. There's a real awareness that food bank workers on the front line and sort of very much dealing with residents who have a number of issues. And I was just feeling that would be a really great way to sort of get in touch with modern slavery, because I know at our food bank there were issues at the start of lockdown where we were seeing a lot of people coming through who were no recourse and seemed to be moving between the same properties, which just sort of aroused a few suspicions. So I think it would be really helpful, and certainly there was a real hunger for that level of bite-sized training, which at the moment we as a council are offering to members of the voluntary sector through the social welfare advisor training network, to make sure that anybody who's having conversations with people who are they're coming into contact with can just sort of pick up on issues like that and will know how to sort of deal with them correctly.
Thank you very much, Councillor Masters. Was there a specific recommendation that you would like to add to the report in that, or was it just a general comment?
I think it's just sort of building that in and making a suggestion that it's offered as part of the social welfare advisor training programme that the council's currently offering to volunteers within our local voluntary sector. Okay,
there is a part in the report that talks about training. Roger, can you hear me?
Hello, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Are you able to add what Councillor Masters has said under the training part of the report? That would be helpful if that's something that you could do. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, I'm on mute. Does any other member have anything they'd like to say at this time in terms of the report? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so we need to agree this report before it can be presented to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So I'm going to move that the committee agree the modern slavery report and its recommendations. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Bailey, Councillor Gray, thank you very much. Just need to see a show of hands in terms of the vote. So can we formally agree this? Fantastic, thank you. And my thanks to the Crime and Antisocial Behaviour Scrutiny Commission for this. I'm going to be moving on to agenda item number 8, which is our work programme. Would any member like to make suggestions about the scheduled items that we have on our work programme at this time? Okay, I've already agreed that the Commission will receive an update on CCTV in the borough at the next meeting. So if no member has any other item that they would wish to discuss, I'm going to move swiftly on. Does any member have anything that they would like to add? Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item number 9, the date of the next meeting. At this time, we do not know the date of our next meeting, but we will be deciding that in the next few days. I would just like to thank everybody for attending, and this now concludes the business of the committee, and I now declare the meeting closed at 8:30. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. Greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.